Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. Nice to meet you all.
Likewise.
Very good to meet you.
All right.
We got people rolling in. That's good. Hello, everybody. Get started here in a few minutes. Is Cherie joining us? There she is.
Everybody, how you doing? Welcome, welcome. We give people 3 minutes, as we usually do, to hop on. Everybody, tell us what city and state you are in. We're officially live on the Zoom and on the YouTube. In the building, we're here with Dr. Xavier Bruce, friend of mine, came over here to our side. I know him from my military group, but he said, hey, I know about blockchain and supply chain, and he teaches at UVA, right? University.
I teach at Florida Tech and the Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, as well as Fairmont State University.
Okay. Perfect. Florida A&M. Yeah, HBCU. So he said, hey, I know about this topic. Let me come and talk. And I said, absolutely. So we're going to talk about blockchain and the supply chain. We're going to wait just 2 more minutes. We are going to make sure you put your city and state in the chat so everybody can know where you are coming from. And y'all know, have a little fun tonight. So since Dr. Keisha isn't here, we can't give away Bitcoin, but we're still going to have a couple of trivia questions tonight. So yeah, should be fun time. Also, everybody put a 1 in the chat if you're already a part of our Discord group. Put a 2 in the chat if you are not. 1 in the chat if you're a part of our Discord group, 2 in the chat if you are not. We want to make sure that you are meeting us on Discord because there's a lot of great conversations happening there, and we want you to be in the building there as well. So I see, Dr. Bruce, you're not a part of our Discord channel, so I'm going to say meet us in Discord here, and I'm going to throw in our link. Totally free. You can be a part of the conversation that is happening over there. All righty then. Well, we're going to get started. Hey, everybody. You know, if it's Wednesday, it is Blockchain Day. Welcome to Blockchain Chat. I'm Cherie. This is Black Blockchain Consultants, where we talk about the business of blockchain. This is going to be a $3.1 trillion industry. Our question is, how do we as a people and as individuals participate? Whether you want a blockchain career, you want to invest in the blockchain, whether you're investing time or money in projects, you want to open up a business, there's going to be trillions of dollars made over the next decade plus with regards to blockchain. And we just want you to be positioned to get a couple $1 million a year, not a big deal, but it could be a big difference for you and your family. So put a 3 in the chat if you are down for that as a mission for your life. Put a 3 in the chat. All right, I'm seeing the 3s coming up. Love it, absolutely love it. So I'm going to take a couple of additional minutes, introduce BBC to those of you who are not familiar with us. Our mission, again, is to help Black people discover blockchain careers, start blockchain businesses, invest in blockchain projects, and build wealth through the blockchain industry. We talk about this every week. Mainstream adoption is coming, and we're looking for the chasm. And actually, within Discord, every day it's like new stories popping up, especially about NFTs, that's non-fungible tokens. If you don't know that terminology, don't worry about it. The Titanization maestro, that's not his name, Maximalist, is here. I'm still on the Titan of tokenization. Mr. Eric Spence is here to talk with you all about that. But within any industry, there is a time where you have early adopters in, and all of a sudden you see a flood of people coming in for the early majority. We haven't even gotten there yet. This is where the money is made, when the early majority and the late majority comes into an industry. So if you're here with us now, you are right on time. Because in this group, we geek over tokenization of assets, smart contracts, blockchain security, and all things blockchain. We have this week, we have Dr. Xavier Bruce here talking about the supply chain. Next week, we've got Bettina. She has just one name, like Madonna or Beyonce. She is here to talk about UI, UX, which is user interface and user exchange, and how things have changed in the industry and transitioned and become better for us all. And then March 31st is our last blockchain chat as a community, but you can still be a part of our Discord group. You can meet us on Discord by going to blackblockchainconsultants.com, or if you want to take any of our courses, Blockchain 101, the other courses we have around blockchain security, etc., that is at blockchainstudies.tech. So we want to invite you to go to both of those websites and check out what we have. So, Eric, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. Eric Spence, BBC Inner Circle member, and I like to call myself a tokenization maximalist, just because I believe that application of blockchain is wide as the ocean in the terms of how we're going to implement it, how it's going to be used, and what we're going to see happen after it, after we start seeing more and more assets being tokenized. Cherie mentioned NFTs earlier. Like NFTs are another application of tokenization. So that's it. Always excited to be here on Blockchain Chat. Really excited to hear Bruce and what he's going to say. So that's it.
Perfect. And Talisha?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Talisha Shine. I'm your admin and your tech advisor here, also an Inner Circle member. So as Eric has said, we're moving into an interesting time. I know we're talking about this a lot in the Discord group, but also in the Facebook group. Everybody's asking me a lot of questions with regard to this particular application being the NFTs. But there's so much more that we can talk about. And again, we want to stress that this is the business aspect of it. So we're not going to harp on the whole techie aspect of it. If you want to know that, I'm glad to help you with that. But at this point, we really need to talk about the business models, because they're coming hard and fast right now. And you see what's happening because the lack of preparation has gotten people into some interesting predicaments with having their stuff out there and not protected. So we'll talk about that a little bit later, probably.
All right, before Dr. Bruce comes up, I have two questions for you. So question number one, we're going to take them one by one. In the chat, how big is the supply chain industry expected to be by 2027? Throw in your best guess in the chat. How big, this is according to Allied Market Research, don't look it up on Google, just guess. This is their estimate by 2027. How big is the supply chain market expected to be? I don't see anybody answering. $100 billion, $3 billion. Other estimates. Global supply chain, 15 billion. And actually this is saying global supply chain management. So that's even better for us. Global supply chain management, 45 trillion. So I'm going to tell you, based on the article that I see here, I missed the term management. So this is global supply chain management market size is $37.4 billion. That's just management. Dr. Bruce, do you know how big the global supply chain market size is, just overall? I would imagine trillions of dollars, right?
It's a lot. I'm not sure what the numbers are nowadays, but it's big.
So if you think about it, the opportunity within supply chain management is $37 billion. And then, okay, so I have another statistic here. By 2026, how big do you think blockchain supply chain market is going to be? This is a report that I have here. They have here the market by platforms, services, applications, whether it's asset tracking, smart contracts, enterprise, different verticals, healthcare, financial services. How big do you think blockchain supply chain market is going to be by 2026? So we have some very high answers here. According to this is Markets and Markets. They have, by 2026, it's expected to be $3.2 billion. So the management is 37 billion. And even by 2026, we're looking at blockchain just being 10% of the supply chain management. To me, that means that you have a long runway with something like this. Talisha and Eric, what do you guys think about that as a stat?
I would say that's where we're starting again, because we're removing some of the systems, and these systems don't just, up and leave. This is not a plug and play kind of application or infrastructure. So that, again, taking you all through that time frame, there's going to be intermittent pieces. And just like anything else, you always talk about this as somebody's going to have to break open and do it first before everybody gets on. But everybody's doing it incrementally. So we're seeing bits and pieces of the supply chain, like we talked about a long time ago with regard to Health and Human Services doing their supply chain very small with even just the procurement kind of application and paralleling their systems. We're going to see this probably for a long time, but I think it's going to hit a stride coming that 2026. So that's probably why that number seems a little low, but it will actually ramp itself up very, very quickly. That trajectory is going to skyrocket.
Yeah, so you bring up a good point. This brings us back, and Dr. Bruce, I swear we're coming to you, but that brings us back to here, where all of a sudden, things are chugging along, and all of a sudden you see this steep incline. And this is where the billionaires are made here. So with that, I do want to bring our guest here on. Okay, Dr. Bruce, why don't you, number one, tell everyone a little bit about yourself, some of the lessons that you teach. Give us like maybe the 10-minute overview of what's happening in the industry.
Yeah, so thanks for having me, Cherie. I really appreciate it. Thanks for all of you all that are listening, that you showed up, and you're here to listen a little bit about what I have to say about supply chain management and the intersection with that and blockchain, as well as medical countermeasures. So I'm Dr. Xavier Bruce. I have a DBA in Global Supply Chain Management from Walden University. I got that back in 2011. I stayed in the military for about 24 years. And when you're in the healthcare administration space, you move around quite a bit. So you may be in logistics for a few years, then you may go into some other aspects of the military. So once I got my doctorate, I moved around quite a bit, but I ended up teaching online while I was still on active duty with Embry-Riddle, Aeronautical University, the Florida Institute of Technology, Fairmont State University. I've taught for Colorado Tech University, American Public University. So a number of colleges over the last, I would say, 7 to 8 years. And what I am doing now is looking at the implications of the medical countermeasures and the impact of security issues that blockchain could mitigate. So that's what I'm here to talk about. My talk will be fairly short, but what I want to let you all know is that not only am I in the supply chain management space, I'm also the Chief Executive Officer for Uplift Energy Coaching, that's helping veterans overcome stress and anxiety. I'm also the chapter commander for National Association for Black Veterans for the Western Maryland chapter. So as I look across the board and I see you all out there as subject matter experts in IT and blockchain, this is something that I want to share with our Black veterans who may be in the IT space but never thought about blockchain. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you before I go into my short presentation.
Yeah, so we just have two more panelists, Rich and Percy. So why don't you two introduce yourself super quick, and then we'll let Dr. Bruce give his presentation.
Good evening, Rich Davis, member of Black Blockchain Consultants, and Bitcoin and crypto investor, trader, also a digital blockchain asset consultant in the realm of NFTs, non-fungible tokens, and moved into music. And that's coming from the Bronx, New York. And also in HR too, also by day as a talent acquisition specialist.
All right, Percy Rose. I'm been working with in the blockchain space probably only for about 6 to 8 months now, but through this group I've learned a ton. I developed a major, which is something that Cherie has I think harped on everyone, and so my main focus is really trying to use blockchain technology to increase customer loyalty and customer engagement for enterprise companies. That's where my passion is, and that's what I'm focusing on. But like Rich, I'm an investor in cryptocurrency as well, and so those are my two passions, and happy to be here.
Okay, all right, Dr. Bruce, take it away.
You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Mute. All right, here we go. Let me share my screen. All right, quick. Let me. All right, can you all see that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. As I mentioned before, I just wanted to take a few moments to bring your attention to the intersections between medical countermeasures, healthcare supply chain management, and blockchain technology. I'm not an expert at any of these. However, I work in a space that has to understand the intersections between these three aspects so that we protect our country and our service members here and abroad. So now, who here has read about the supply chain hack? The hack into the supply chain associated with medical countermeasures. If you haven't, what happened was there was an attack. Apparently it began when hackers broke into a company's systems and planted malware in the IT management software, and which it then unknowingly distributed to its clients through a series of updates. As you can imagine, these systems update periodically. Well, the attack wasn't detected until 9 months later. So just keep that in mind as we talk about blockchain and medical countermeasures. So let's take a look at what these medical countermeasures are. What is that term? You may not have seen that terminology before. Now, some believe that the COVID-19 pandemic has exposed weaknesses in the manufacture and the distribution of medical countermeasures. When you look at those terms, it's basically what type of medicine or medical supplies will counter whatever is going to be detrimental or damaging to the human body. So the COVID-19 pandemic has exposed weaknesses, and when we are heavily reliant on foreign countries, that's not a good thing. Now, the reason why medical countermeasures are so important is because having enough medicines and medical supplies, in terms of medicines, we're looking at, the different vaccines, but in terms of supplies, we're looking at masks and gloves and things of that sort. Now, they can help save the lives of those who may need them the most during a pandemic like we're dealing with today, such as COVID-19. Now, these medical countermeasures get to the public when healthcare workers and public health providers dispense or administer them through federal, state, and local emergency response plans. And we're seeing how that is going. As we watch the news, we can see how well the vaccinations are going and the percentage in each state. So some states are doing better than others. Now, this is what healthcare supply chain management is all about. The healthcare supply chain begins with the manufacturer of the medical products. What makes these vaccines? As you can see in some of the news stations and on TV, you've got the labs, you have people pulling these precursors together for these vaccines, and you have different manufacturers of these vaccines. Well, the manufacturer produces these items and sends them to the distribution center. Then hospitals can either purchase products directly through the distributor or the manufacturer, or through a group purchasing organization, depending on the type of product. Then the products are sent to the organization and stocked into inventory for patients and providers. The issue we're having now is that there's no stock. There's not a huge stock of this vaccine. And as soon as it comes out of the factories, it's being distributed across the country and put in the arms of those who need it. As you can imagine, designing innovative methods and new approaches to facilitate the flow of information and products from suppliers to consumers, to the end user, to that shot being put in the arm, that is at the heart of any excellent supply chain. However, major problems include out of stock issues, shortages. The out of stock issues, that leads to expensive healthcare delivery charges and unwarranted increase in inventory spend and pilferage, people starting to steal. There was some stories about those that were stealing vaccines from different areas. There's also a demand for specific types of products. There's hoarding, and then there's also security. Healthcare organizations must be willing to take risks, including teaming up with the right third-party logistics provider and leveraging the power of advanced supply chain technology to create a better supply chain and risk management strategy. Supply chain attacks are one of the most devastating attacks that we see because these software development companies have direct access to thousands of customers. This is where blockchain technology comes into play. As mentioned earlier, cyber criminals are targeting the COVID-19 vaccine supply chain with phishing and spear phishing attacks. Blockchain technology is uniquely and perfectly suited to address these problems. Given the readiness and cost effectiveness of blockchain-based solutions, it will be easier than ever before for companies to leverage this technology in a meaningful way. Where today, most medical and pharma supply chains face extensive logistical challenges, which can include a lack of visibility in real-time shipment locations, like where is the vaccine? Where are these shipments? So you have that, but then you have this uncertainty about the weather and other transport interferences, also product quality tracking and verification, customs reporting across the borders, complicated invoicing and payments, and it goes on and on. but a blockchain-enabled supply chain could immutably, transparently, and efficiently track every step of the vaccine. The coronavirus, this crisis has presented huge challenges and disruptions to healthcare and other supply chains, in many cases posing big safety risks to frontline care workers who lack the sufficient PPE. Many large and small businesses from outside traditional healthcare procurement processes have stepped in to produce masks and gowns and other essential supplies. Once the dust settles on this situation, US government and industry will need to take a close look at why we faced these shortages, why we faced these barriers that made it so difficult to track the volumes and locations of essential supplies. Then it will be time to get to work on transforming processes and determining what can be done to fill any current gaps in our infrastructure and our supply chains. So with that said, again, I wanted to make it short. This is my website. Again, I teach online. My current position is that of, I'm inside the intelligence community. So you may find that I mince my words every now and then because I don't want to say too much. But as you can imagine, the intersection between medical countermeasures, right now it's the COVID-19 vaccine. The intersection between that, supply chain management, you get bad guys trying to get into the supply chain to screw up the medical countermeasures distribution. But it's the blockchain technology that will be looked up on to address these issues so that we'll be prepared for the next pandemic. Thank you for your time. Over back to you, Cherie.
Great. That was a great presentation. I never personally thought. I know Talisha thinks about this all the time, so she's probably the best person to provide some insight and some thoughts. So Talisha, I'd like to bring you up. What are some things you want to add to what we just heard?
I think it's a great presentation, Dr. Bruce. And these are directly the things that we talk about on a consistent basis. I'm in healthcare, so I spent the majority of my IT career in healthcare IT. So there, from every aspect, this goes with internal systems as well as external systems, and even on the insurance side, because this impacts the entire framework that we're working in. So any data that is going into the system, be it patient data, provider data, and even the supplies that are needed and required, and this definitely comes into COVID-19 exposed all of the gravity because we couldn't figure out where things were, from the human capital to the actual, where is the PPE, where are these things, where are the ventilators? Nothing could be found because they're in a siloed system, even internally to the hospitals and even to the conglomerates. This was their biggest problem. So internally they were having this problem, let alone adding the magnitude of having a global pandemic put upon them that they had to service individuals for and care for people at the same time. So I think these are the kinds of things that I think sometimes we don't understand completely. It's oh, it's just a truck and a shipment. This really has an impact in many different ways, and there's different series of them. So attacking it from just getting the supplies, the countermeasures to the right place is one thing. And I think this kind of always reminds me of when we talk about the business of blockchain book. This is one of the things that Eric and I kind of debated about, why would people want to share a blockchain? Why would this come into play? This is the example. The supply chain management truly can be a decentralized source of information so that everybody can get it, because this is where we're not trying to be competitive. We're trying to actually save lives and put that information out there. So when you get those kind of things, those countermeasures are truly federally funded. They're not something that you have to physically buy. The hospitals are going to get reimbursed anyway. That's where the joint aspect of using a singular blockchain, having all that information, and perhaps maybe Oracle's dividing and conquering the information. But that's where I think that's one of the main examples of how we can have a distributed environment really service the community and the country as a whole. And this could be, again, global. We can take that from one step forward. But I think we have to think about these things in a very different way. I think we just kind of just, oh, there's just stuff, and oh, get the toilet paper, and oh, get these things, and everything all comes together very quickly. And we've seen that right now when we couldn't get the supplies to where they need, and they were there. Some of them were damaged, some of them were lost, some of them were literally sold and resold to the wrong people. So all of these things could actually be, you know, kind of intercepted with having the technology and having the conglomerate effect on our healthcare system.
So I have a capitalism question for you then. Are the hospitals really open to that, especially after COVID? Or, you know, are we still putting profits over patients? Or is there a bit of both, you know?
I think depending on your hospital. And that's, I think, again, we're looking at healthcare from not just the description of a hospital, of clinics, of doctors, of providers. All those things come into what we're talking about our healthcare system. Every part is fragmented and broken. So we're moving from a fee for service to a fee for quality. All these things were kind of put into these systems, but without the things to do it, you're not going to make anything better. So we're going to, again, the federal government paid for a lot of the testing, but people were still being billed $250 to $500 for just a COVID test in the middle of a parking lot somewhere, so nobody could be tracked. And I have to find out where these people are like, oh yeah, I went out. And I'm like, I don't know where you were at Walmart and you got a test. I don't know that. These are the kind of things that we're trying to circumvent more so than even capitalizing. First, we got to get the fraud that's happening instantaneously under control before we even think about capital gains.
Right. And then I have a final question for you, which is, I just had it. Don't tell me I lost it. Oh, yes. Do you think that ultimately this is going to be something that's going to need to be legislated in and forced upon the industry? Like, was it electronic medical records? I think it was like, yeah. You see that? Okay.
Yeah, I definitely see legislation, just because, first of all, it's going to have some funding. The hospitals aren't going to have, just like they didn't have a lot of funding to bring in, you know, automation to the systems, but they were mandated to have it. So there needed to be some kind of like, if I can't afford it, how can you mandate me to do it? This will be the same aspect. And again, one of the benefits of having a decentralized is that different sources can be utilized to really populate the entire system. So you're getting, you know, a lot of bang for your buck. Even if you put in a little bit, you're getting the resources, and the more that everyone participates, the better those resources actually will come. So that data is going to be much more richer, much more succinct, much more effective, the more you participate. So there is a kind of impetus where before the EHRs from a siloed system is like, I don't really see how I'm getting better, until they were asked to do it, or less, not get reimbursed for their work, and or getting those kickbacks that they needed. So the systems themselves will there's probably some money chasing that will have to happen, but it'll be a top-down approach, because this is not something that can be done independently.
Yeah. And Maria's saying here in the chat, we had a situation in Philly where a 22-year-old Drexel student got a contract under the health department as a nonprofit and then changed status to a for-profit. He was caught taking some vaccines for friends. There was an issue with people's information. It was a deputy health commissioner who advised him on how to get the contract. That person was forced to resign. Wow. So just from referring something like this, wow. So anybody else want to chime in? Oh, I'm sorry, Talisha, go ahead.
That's a prime example. And we talked a lot about that, because that was flagged instantaneously with having these distribution centers being in schools and, you know, little strip malls, and people not knowing where the actual supply, but they dropped it off, but no one knew who to sign for it and why it was there. So some people just walked off with it. And we had a large portion, over $20 million worth of vaccines have been stolen since the distribution started to begin. So
gone on the black market. Yeah.
Gone. And so at this point, people trying to sell it back to hospitals or institutions are becoming a very large problem. And this happens incrementally every time it comes out. So every vaccine is being pilfered the minute that it hits the scene.
Yeah. So anybody else have a question?
Yeah, Dr. Bruce, one of the things I noticed that you were kind of kept coming back to was risk mitigation, using supply chain for risk mitigation. And it sounds like it's, you know, the base case or the main driver from your point of view, or the angle that you look at it is, you know, ensuring that the goods, that in this case, medicine or the supplies, don't fall into the wrong hands, that we have a way to properly track it end to end from the ones who manufactured the goods all the way to the customer. And so, you know, that sounds like that's kind of the main focus that you have. And how do we ensure the authenticity of these goods from manufacturer to customer? And then maybe a byproduct of that is, once we're able to ensure the authenticity, how do we also ensure the speed of it? Because as you talked about, there were so many delays in actually getting vaccines in the patient's hands. And so with an ability to have the right infrastructure and validate that, you know, every time this touches hands and, you know, goes from one entity to the next, that it's authenticated on the blockchain, and, you know, we can know what we're getting when it arrives at its destination. But, you know, I wanted to try and understand. I understood the kind of points that you were hammering on.
Yes, absolutely. And from an intelligence standpoint, you got some bad guys out there who, if they tap into the system the right way, what if they reconfigure the actual precursors? Like they go in and play around with the ingredients or the makeup of the medicines. And what if they ship the wrong medicines and vaccines to the wrong people? Or, as you can imagine, if you get into the system the right way, or the wrong way, if you will, you can really mess up what is being put in the vaccine or into the medical countermeasure. So it's not just the speed or getting the right product to the right people at the right time, but what about the right makeup of the actual medical countermeasure? Because that's something that they can screw up as well.
And how have you seen this working in practice? Is this a matter of, okay, we have the supplier who's made the vaccine and we're going to ask them to do some type of certification on the blockchain so we know that, you know, the makeup is, you know, exactly what we want, and then when it's passed over to the next, you know, to the distributor, then we all expect that they're going to do some type of authentication or certification that no one has come in and swapped it or changed the makeup. How do you see that working in practice?
Yeah, in practice, it would have to be that authentication in some form or fashion. I'm not sure exactly what that looks like, but some type of authentication of, okay, these are the specific ingredients or precursors in these particular medical countermeasures, versus just looking at the vial or the lot going from point A to point B. But okay, let's look inside the vial itself and authenticate what's actually in this. So that's something that should be considered as these bad actors are getting into these systems in some form or fashion. So something to consider, but I'm not sure exactly what it looks like or how it's going to be done, but it's something to consider at the manufacturing, at the raw material level. Over.
And I
mean, that sounds like a career right there. I'm
brainstorming. I'm in a group right now with regard to that. And we're talking about supply chain as well. But it is, again, at the very supply level of all the things that are required. So obviously the medication is made up of different biogenetics and things that are required. They get that from a source. That source needs to be able to validate whatever they've sent them and of what quantity. So that in itself goes on the blockchain first.
Right.
Then if it says company A got 22 of this, they know that it can only make so much of the quantity. So they can't, again, the numbers start to add up really quickly. You're calculating, and the use of IoT devices is where this kind of comes in. Once that is calibrated to say this is it, that IoT device says yes or no. It is what it is. If I can't clear it, it doesn't go And so now I have another countermeasure kind of built into this. So every stage of the game with regard to it literally being from the raw material to it being produced to the end product to the going to the distribution, all of those will be tracked in some form or fashion, still on that singular blockchain.
Now I know it's too early. I know it's too early to talk capitalism, Talisha, but
Never
one
too
thing
early. Never too early.
Everybody, what's the cost
Never
of that?
too early.
What's the cost of it? And we're building everything in the same way because it's like, well, how do you build an IoT device to tell me? Because I got to calibrate it to know what is it. This is this vaccine or is it that vaccine? And they're different. They're going to show up different.
Well, one thing that I guess as you're talking about is just with the authentication, if I'm a hospital and I'm paying for certain medication and, you know, truckloads of it, and then at some point in the supply chain, there's a mix up or, you know, somebody swaps it or something like that. I've ended up paying a bunch of money for something that I can't use.
Correct.
So technically this could help me reduce my costs because there's probably, you know, 15-20% of, you know, the products that I end up getting I can't use, and so now I can actually maximize.
Like we're trying to be proactive inside of the blockchain. So this is where again we're trying to make the improvement before anything happens. So it's almost you're trying to basically back into the solution. So we're saying before it even gets to me, how can I validate it? From again, as soon as they put it on that truck, is it that thing? The QR code is going to tell me that. The IoT device is going to tell me that. Then it's like, okay, he made a stop somewhere. Did he open up, the truck? Because if he opened up the truck, it's going to signal the IoT device to say, now we need to check these again. Like every little thing, we've gotten that granular to some people like, oh, in the logistics process, I know you go 22.7 miles. The IoT device knows that if you went 47, we need to check that case again because you went somewhere where you weren't supposed to go. We're trying to put, GPSs on the IoT plus this. So it becomes really like, I'm amazed at the people who come up with some of the things. So I'm like, oh, it's just this. And they're like, no, we can add these and the tire tread and the weight and the distribution. And we're collecting a large amount of data. So my job is to sit there and say, where does this go? How does this manage? Before it ever, like the hospital is the very last endpoint for us.
Right. So while it may require an upfront,
the product is really kind of like we're monitoring it as if it's the patient.
Right.
So like let's look at the health of the product as the patient because we want no contamination at any point. It never needs to be compromised. And how do we get that to where now the patient meets the patient? That's kind of like we're trying to make this cyclical, and it's very challenging. I will say I can't.
Well, and I think that's probably the risk mitigation that Dr. Bruce talked about up front. It's all about risk mitigation, and I think the better job we can do on risk mitigation up front, then in fact it helps you reduce your cost downstream.
It's the upfront cost because I said these things have to be built. It's like, do you take the hit first? And this is always healthcare's issue. Doing anything requires that it be built, it be tested, and that's where the large amount, once it's implemented, you'll see the price savings, but that's hard to tell people like, give me $20 million. In 5 years, you'll see a good result. They're like, I don't really see that as a good deal for me. But that's really what happens specifically in the healthcare industry is that everything it precedes itself. So we have to devise these systems because they don't exist. And we're strapped in the sense that there's a lot of like HIPAA compliancy. There's a lot of other things that go along with every little bit. Like if I want that data, can I share it? There's no PHI here, but they're like, no, you got some extra things and some proprietary data and something you can't do it. I'm like, and if it's a handheld device, all of these things start to become trying to make a solution that's not expensive, which it's going to be, but also effective. So I kind of just worry about the effective. I'm not the person with the purse string, so I don't worry about that part.
So Dr. Bruce, this is Richard. So I got a few serious questions, being your intelligence. Where is Satoshi Nakamoto, and did he work for the NSA or the CIA?
Don't answer that question.
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Anyway, no, but all seriousness, I just thought I'd break it up a bit. Now, I'm in the healthcare field, also in the HR, and I would just would like to know, because I would like to share this video at some point. What would be kind of like the simplest comparison with the current system now, and how blockchain will actually solve maybe some pain points you can think of for a healthcare system with supply chain?
It kind of goes back to what Talisha mentioned. It's going more granular into those biogenetics, into those the raw materials, versus just thinking it, because as a logistician, you think about, okay, the right product at the right cost, the right place, right time, right quantity, but okay, well, what about the actual factuals? What about the actual medical countermeasures? So I think that the Internet of Things and being more granular to tracking specific aspects of a medical countermeasure. Right now, it's COVID-19 vaccines, but what about what comes, 5 or 10 years from now? So if we can take our lessons learned from the COVID-19 vaccine, and people, I see in the chat pod about stories of students, they're, stealing vaccines, and there's stories all over the place. You're like, wow, how was it that easy to be pilfered, to be stolen, to be, to be hacked? So I think, to answer your question in terms of blockchain, if it can get more granular in terms of the actual makeup of the countermeasure, I think that will be something to learn from this particular situation.
So you'd say that currently, right now, the way how the supply chain management isn't as granular, but blockchain actually solves that problem where it does get granular, where the security is much more impenetrable.
Right. I think that more entities along the supply chain, once they learn the lessons learned and the weaknesses from what's going on right now, hopefully there'll be more adoption of blockchain technology so that they're not in the news for being hacked, or they're not all over the papers for not having their risk mitigation strategy up to par. So yes, I think that more companies will be looking into blockchain management and calling on you all to come in and brief them and give them presentations and help them learn and make it make sense for them. So I think that that's the difference, Rich. It's right now, it's only a certain percentage have adopted blockchain technology, but after the dust settles, I think more and more companies will adopt it and will mitigate anything, any bad actors who try to tap into our supply chain next time.
Dr. Bruce, I have a question. COVID-19 won't be the last deadly viral contagion that we battle with in our lifetime. And we saw the exposure of a lot of the vulnerabilities that you just highlighted in the global supply chain. How much time do we have to get this right before the next one? I'm not asking you to become like a doomsday prophet, but kind of, but kind of similar to, like, a lot of times, we see this with climatologists, where they'll talk about effects upon the environment and time that we have in order to mitigate and offset those effects. And if not, then we'll be left with the consequences. But looking at this, how much time would you say we have where we really do need to get this straight?
Well, that's a great question. And keep in mind that there are some theories out there that some epidemics or pandemics can be engineered and not be, I guess, naturally occurring. So, as you can imagine, there are some bad actors out there who may be tapping into supply chains and looking at the biogenetics and what's in this and what's in that, and what keeps them from building something that will affect the whole world a year from now or 2 years from now. So it's hard to put a time frame on it, but just realize that when bad actors get a hold of our systems and get into the software of supply chain entities, there's a lot of things that they can do. There's a lot of things. There's some really smart guys out there, and they're not doing great things with their smarts. They're looking at devastation. So I don't think we have, I think it starts now, right now, getting ready for the next naturally occurring or engineered virus. So the time is now.
Got it. Thank you.
And this has been in process, I guess. I do want to say, like, this wasn't just like, oh, this just happened and now we have to react. There are many a times, I think, like going back, I don't know how old everybody is, but if you remember a time when Tylenol was compromised, right? And we didn't remember that.
I remember.
It was all over and they couldn't find it. Just a couple bottles here, a couple bottles there. The legislation changed immediately and there were things in place, and we had, basically foolproof capsules put on them. They were gel caps instead of capsulated, so they couldn't hold the information. You could see if it was tampered with. All of those measures are always constantly, they're kind of paralleling everything that we're doing. So again, pandemics are predictable in some aspects. We've had this conversation where we kind of knew certain biologics come together could cause these type of problems. So it was our response, and not so much even the response to it. It was the systems that we had to rely on that failed us, because we could predict, just like we can predict the weather and when there's going to be tragic storms, you have to have the infrastructure to support what you're going to try to do. And if you don't, we were seeing this happening. We were using a very archaic system, and we're still using that system. And we were kind of relying on it to hopefully just stand the test of time, and it just failed us at this point. So I think there's always a constant attempt at making things better, but there are limitations. There's limitations to how it can actually be rolled out. Again, healthcare is not a nice system. They don't work well together. And it's just like a very difficult relationship to try to get people to do what's in the best interest, because it is a capitalistic aspect. There is, profit in caring for people. And that becomes always the stalemate. So there are things that we're always kind of going, and we're doing what we can do, I think, but it's definitely hampered. And a lot of this was just like, oh, we'll get to it when we get to it. And now we just kind of had to accelerate a little bit because we have to address this issue. It has to be addressed in this way. But I think what happens is even contaminations of just regular drugs, of clinical data trials. Like, we're not even saying, even if it's not a, global pandemic, that we just want to make drugs that are better. And how do we do that if we have bad samples? We're not getting cross. We're using the data incorrectly. We're using biological weapons to harm people in our own communities. So these are the kind of things that constantly come up when you have a conversation. So like, let's make healthcare better. We instantly have to deal with all the other stuff before we even get to a solution-based conversation.
Agreed.
I know
So I have, I'm sorry, Talisha, go
I
ahead.
know that's depressing. Like the Doomsday, we just went right into it. Like, yeah,
No. Well, you know what? This is sad.
I love it. I love healthcare, but it's just horribly, horribly broken.
So I wrote some final comments down, and I want all of you to chime in on these since we have 7 minutes left. The first thing is, this session today really reinforces find a true problem, or find a problem that blockchain can truly solve. Right? So those of you who are members, you have been potentially part of our discussions where we reviewed the real business of blockchain and what blockchain is and what blockchain isn't, and the types of problems that blockchain can solve and the ones that people would like to solve, but it's really just a database all shiny. So, I really do think that this discussion reinforced that. And I do think that we, as a community, really need to start thinking about some of the larger scale problems, because this is a larger scale problem, right? But somebody's going to make billions of dollars a year, or become the next Elon Musk or whatever, kinda, you know, if you're able to tackle this and solve it in such a way, you know. The second thing is that finding derivatives of this as well. So Dr. Bruce has brought in this problem from one specific aspect. However, it affects all sorts of supply chain issues, you know, all sorts of products, all sorts of, you know, countries and stuff moving from one place to the other. Again, we talked about the fact that the supply chain management industry is $37 billion, not the just overall supply chain. So when we talk about picking a major, this, for some of you who haven't picked one yet, this might be something you want to look into. The third thing is there's a lot of money out there now for especially Black entrepreneurs. Goldman Sachs just announced $10 billion that they are putting into Black women. There's lots of money going to Black entrepreneurs overall, so guys, don't feel like you're left out. I believe that we need to be strategic in coming together and trying to think of certain problems that we could solve, where we could go out and get subsidies and get real mega investments in order to solve big problems for the globe overall, and then be able to bring that in and create Black wealth with it. I just found out that like Elon Musk, and I don't know if it's Tesla or SpaceX or whatever, has hundreds of billions of dollars of subsidies from the United States government. And I'm like, okay, well, you know, we should be going after this. How does he have all it? How is he getting subsidized to become a trillionaire? Like, you know, and what can we do? Well, we have to tackle as big of a problem as, you know, Elon Musk and some of these other people are doing. So that's my soapbox, but I did write those down as you all were talking, and I'd love for any of you to chime in with anything that I've said.
Gentlemen?
And y'all can talk in the chat too. Let me know what you think.
I think you're all on mute.
Wow, everybody's quiet. Okay.
No, I just say that, you know, I agree. If we can solve, I mean, I believe in the term that says, find a way to serve the many, for service to many leads to greatness. So if we can service the globe, to your point, in solving a problem globally, Cherie, to your point, and to do that comparison with what do we currently have now and how blockchain solves that problem, to make it better, to make it more efficient, and to build Black wealth too, also on a Pan-African level. That's even actually even piggybacking off of other systems that we can actually maybe collaborate or be allies to also. I mean, prime example, Cardano, I mean, is built off of the Ethereum system, and they're solving problems just as good as Ethereum right now, using blockchain technology in their own ecosystem. But just the idea of just the competition, you know, there's enough for everybody, is what I'm trying to say. You know? I mean, there was blockchain, then out of that birthed Ethereum, and out of Ethereum birthed, you know, thousands of coins. But then the ones that are in the top 10, you know, primarily, you know, Cardano and Polkadot or what have you, you know, solving certain problems on a global level, that you know, we can put our heads together. We got no smarts there to think of problem we can solve globally.
You know, I just want to say this. Listen, I believe in tokenization of the world as a concept. I love digital cats that are tokenized, absolutely. But nevertheless, it's always important to understand a lot of the utilitarian factors that come into play with applying blockchain technology. And, you know, as Dr. Bruce highlighted in his presentation, as Felicia chimed in, this is a time also where literal lives are going to be saved as we push and as we move the technology itself and have it implemented to solve a lot of the problems that have existed for quite some time and we've kind of just dealt with. So that's one thing too that I think always kind of undergirds, that kind of drives me a lot in the space. It's just knowing that.
Yeah, I think this is probably one of the biggest, in terms of conversations, one of the best advertisements I've seen for what you keep talking about, Ms. Cherie, is on picking a major, which is what problem are you solving, and I think that we see, Dr. Bruce, you've talked, I think, a lot about what problem blockchain is solving in the healthcare industry. And I think as soon as we all can identify a clear use case and a clear problem, then we really develop that focus and that niche, and we can just get into and can develop creative ideas to go along with that. And so I think this is a great advertisement for the whole picking the major topic.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Microcosm solutions are really the key here. So I think tackling healthcare is not something that you're going to, rid the entire system of its ills in one fell swoop. So beginning at a very small level and doing something very, very niche that works really, really well, because that's the main driver for healthcare, is to collaborate when necessary. So they like to actually buy things that work and then they ramp it up. So maybe it's not so much that you want to fully go full out scale, but you have something that really, really works very well consistently, and then that's purchased. And that may be some of the approach. I want to make sure people don't get overwhelmed by I got to solve the world and save it. You don't have to do that. You just have to come up with one solution, one thing that does something really, really well. We talk about this all the time, onboarding, offboarding with cryptocurrency aspects, but the same really holds true in this space. A singular solution that does what it's supposed to do, you sell it as is, they'll come to you to buy it from you.
And I love this conversation, because if I could do it all over again, I would probably get at least my master's in blockchain technology. It wasn't around back in 2004, but this is exciting. If you can major in it now and study it and really be an expert at it, you can, as Talisha, as Percy mentioned, you can save lives. So you have organizations that would love to have, first of all, diversity and equity and inclusion. These companies need you. They need your face in the space. So if you can bring that subject matter expertise, you got the credentials, whether it's a bachelor's, master's, or doctorate in blockchain technology, and you have that niche, and when you get narrow, once you get narrow, then you can get wide, because now you have blockchain technology in all these different aspects. Yeah, we talked about vaccines, but what about food? What about beverages? What about the industry, where the supplement industry, all these different aspects with ingredients? When you go narrow with biotechnology, then you can really have fun and really go after what you're passionate about, because I bet you blockchain technology can enhance it, or at least mitigate the risks associated with it. So I wish you all well, and I hope that you all really consider blockchain technology as a major or as a space to work in.
Yeah, and I just will say, in this space, you don't necessarily even have to have bachelor's, master's, anything like that. If you can even get a simple certification like at blockchainstudies.tech, and just keep up with the news and the changing tech. Get involved with groups, whether it's ours, other groups as well. Alon Gorham has great blockchain and booze. Talisha's invited to everything. You can just say, Talisha, send me anything you get, and she'll send it to you. But there's a lot of networking that happens. And I want to congratulate Denise. I'm officially appointing her. She says, it sounds like we need to start Black Blockchain Solutions Group. So that's going to be her project for the summer. She has declared it. So, everything's about solving a problem. So thank you to everybody who is here tonight. Thank you, Dr. Bruce, for being our guest. And next week, we're talking about user interface and user experience. So y'all come on back, same time